Hi guys, so today we're going to be talking a little bit while doing our makeup. We're getting ready. This is my first get ready with me of the year, so let's check in. With the way the economy, with the way the world is turning out right now, I just could not understand and fathom why and how is it that a dress is causing this much commotion on Beyonce's internet. So by now you should have seen the viral, or if you haven't, if you're living under a rock, outside of politics and what's going on in the world, by now you should have seen all the commotion going on over this dress. Yes, this one right here. Okay. And I just wanted to add my 2 cents, since we still have, actually I can't even add my 2 cents. I gotta add my 2 nickels because the penny is no longer being coined and minted out here in the streets. Pastor Jamal's wife, Dr. Karri Bryant, beautiful woman, gorgeous woman, beautiful, well-spoken, wore this dress to a gala recently, and she gave what the church folks call an invocation. Let me actually make sure that I'm quoting this right. So I got the details here. I have to interrupt my makeup session for this. Dr. Karri Bryant, wife of Pastor Jamal Bryant, wore a black lace gown with a nude lining, leading some to mistake it for being sheer. The event in question was a fundraising gala, the UNCF ball. It wasn't a church service, by the way. The controversy around the dress is not that really and truly that her dress was the most inappropriate piece of attire ever seen by church folks' eyes. No. Unfortunately, as much as the internet has spoken about this dress, myself included now, the dress wasn't bad. Now, the controversy surrounding the dress is simply that it addresses the idea of modesty in the church and positions and titles in the church. That as the first lady of a church, you must represent your title, right? Because you are within the church. You are a member, you are a leader in the church. You should lead as the first lady. So you should not only exemplify holiness, but also modesty. And it seems like modesty is like the only trace of holiness allowed to be thrown on the first lady when she holds any type of position where her husband is in leadership. Now, we know that in politics, it's very conservative dressing. Like the wife of a leader of a free nation. Similarly, in the church, there's this expectation that the wife of a pastor should carry herself like she is the torchbearer of modesty through and through, not just within the church, but also off church grounds. In this case, Dr. Bryant was off church grounds. And it had a lot of folks, church folks in particular, and even non-church folks, in a tussle about dress code. Everyone just disregarded the time and place clause. There's no clause for the first lady of the church, especially the first lady of a well-known and not so very likable pastor. Jamal Bryant has said some controversial things that church folks don't like. I am pretty much indifferent. I honestly don't really think that I have a stake in the game when it comes to church drama and, you know, politics. But I'm just a viewer like yourself, and this is my take on it. First off, let me just say, I will never marry a pastor. Before we even start dating, I gotta know one or two things. Well, first we're gonna ask, do you love the Lord? Yes. Okay, that's number one. You love the Lord? Great. Second, do you fear God? Beautiful. If you love the Lord, you fear God, they're interchangeable. Now, the third one being, are you a pastor or are you the child of a pastor? If you fail to answer no on the second question, we can't be together. We can't get married. Here's why. Maybe somewhere down the line, my views about how I present myself would change, which I'm sure will change. That happens with maturity. I think, in my humble opinion, I present myself well. I apply the time and place clause when it comes to my dressing. So if I'm at the beach, I'm wearing a bikini. If I'm at the club, I'm showing skin. How much skin now, that's debatable. But if I'm in a conservative setting, I dress conservatively. And when I go to church, I do my best to dress as modestly as I can without me feeling restricted, without me feeling like I'm performing. Now, when you get into different denominations, the level at which you have to be modest or present yourself modest as a woman in that church setting, it can vary. I grew up in a Catholic church, okay, and I'm currently in a non-denominational church, or at least I think I am right now. And neither one of them had ridiculous dress codes. Like, I had to wear a dress at all times. I can't wear pants. They never required that I come with my head covered, and, you know, all of this costume like energy in my dressing. My churches that I've attended since I was a child, it's always been come as you are. But even with that come as you are, there was that understanding that, you know, this is a church setting, so you have to dress modestly and come as though you're coming to receive and be with the Lord. Great. Now back to me marrying a pastor. The only way that you would see me out here becoming a pastor's wife is two things. First, we either both come together and decide to completely give up all aspects of the worldly path and decide that we are going to completely live out our lives together as Christ-like as possible. We can't be like Christ, but we can try to get as close as possible as Christians. That's scenario number one. Scenario number two, if I meet you and I'm still very worldly and you just happen to be the son of a preacher or the pastor himself, I have to be 100% ready and willing to shed all things worldly, my mind, spiritually, how I present myself. Like, it has to become a lifestyle for me entirety before I say, you know what, yeah, I'm ready to be the first lady of a church. Those are the only two scenarios that would ever drive me to agreeing to be a part of that lifestyle, because it is a lifestyle. You know, I don't consider myself to be the most holy Christian. I don't consider myself to even be a perfect Christian. I just know that I'm doing my best every day to follow Christ in the best way that I can, and I am putting myself in environments that facilitate that. And to some degree, I'm still very worldly, you know, and I'm probably what the church folks will consider to be a taboo. Depending on which church and which church setting I find myself in, I might be a complete walking, talking, breathing, living contradiction of what the church preaches. But guess what? That's a lot of people of faith, whether you are Christian, whether you follow the words of the Quran, whether you follow Judaism, whether you are a Buddhist. There are a lot of people on this earth that are still struggling with their walk of faith. And the difference between those who are heavily engulfed in the lifestyle of being a person, a member of faith, is some people don't have the luxury of bearing their sin to the world without reproach. So oftentimes you find a lot of preacher kids having prodigal son and daughter testimonies because for a very long time they walked in sin, but they walked in sin in secrecy. And they end up doing far worse than you and I, who are the average Joe, not part of the church as far as leadership, not filled with all of those responsibilities and expectations that you are to embody because of your association with a leader in the church. Now, for those who had a hard time following me, basically I'm saying it's easier to be a non-preacher's kid or to not be a leader in the church than to actually be a preacher's kid and also be a leader in the church. Again, you will never find me as somebody's preacher wife. If somewhere down the line, y'all, this does happen, then just know it's a choice that I made willingly, and I put the work to make sure that I can uphold and walk in that life passionately and do it to the best of my best. I love the dress. I'm sorry. Dr. Bryant looked gorgeous in that dress. I'm a time, place, and type of woman. She wasn't in the church. She wasn't on the pulpit. She was at a gala. She was at a fundraiser. It was very much on theme. Like, if I'm going to a gala, I would want to see people in gowns. What could have possibly shielded Dr. Bryant from all of the scrutiny with this dress could have been if maybe she would have balanced it out with a shawl, like a fur shawl. But with certain churches, you just can't. There's nothing, it would never be enough, right? So she could have come with a faux fur, cover up her entire cleavage area and have her collarbone showing. And for some church folks, that would have been too much for a first lady. Let's be for real. And honestly speaking, Dr. Bryant is a curvaceous woman. She is beautifully endowed. And for some church folks, that's too much. Growing up in the churches that I grew up in, I feel blessed that I've never experienced any type of scrutiny because of the way my body is shaped. Whether I'm wearing tailored clothing, because I do love me a nice pair of tailored pants, or skirts or dresses. I don't think I've ever had an elder come to me and be like, hey, you can't wear that, or you shouldn't be wearing that because that dress, it shows all your curves, or it shows too much, skin or whatever. At least if I've ever received any type of correction from an elder in the church or just anybody nearby that truly cares and wants me to show up as my best self, as my better godly self or Christ-like self, like, it's always been in a correction of love. It's always been like, okay, you know what, let's try this angle. Like, it's always been presented more as a suggestion. The suggestion does have an undertone, but it's never been one of reproach. It's been one of like, well, you know what, I see where you were trying to go for, let me help you out. That, I think, if 99% of the church took that approach, we would see less and less people, particularly women, who may suffer from a certain level of church hurt because of the way they're naturally shaped and feeling like they're being policed. Because let's be honest, I'm skinny to some, but I'm also curvy to others. And somewhere in the middle, I can play both sides. I can, my weight fluctuates, but also depending on how I dress, you may or may not know that I have curves. And I have seen how there are women that I know personally who just no matter what they wear is going to show. And they always struggle with finding things to wear, especially in conservative spaces, because they are constantly concerned about how they're going to be judged. They can be fully covered up, neck to knee, and because of their body type and because of the fit of the dress, they're going to be scrutinized way differently than I would. Something that people would probably praise me for. Women who are just naturally endowed, they can't get away with that. And I think what's happening with Dr. Karri Bryant is she is just a woman. She's just a girl. She's just a girl. She's a grown woman, okay? Put some respect. But in the essence that, like, we all want to dress up. We want to look nice. We want to still feel confident. We don't want to have to feel like we're walking around and apologizing for our bodies. And I think what could help her in the long run is just get a stylist, okay? One pastor that does it well, lady pastor that does this really well, is Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts. I have never seen Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts have a bad day anywhere in any setting, because she has a stylist, and Styled by J. Boleyn never misses with the First Lady of the Potter House. Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts, and this is not to compare or try to put down Dr. Karri Bryant, because both women very stunning, but I think what helped Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts is that she's also a preacher's kid who also had her prodigal daughter moment. She always talks about how she was pregnant at the age of 13 and how that was like growing up being the daughter of a pastor, being a preacher's kid. And her testimony and how she changed her life around, and it's to the point you could see that she has this grace that she carries, but you can also see that she's very intentional in her dressing because of the fact that she was born and raised into this lifestyle. So it's nothing for her to try to get creative. I can look at some of the outfits that Pastor Sarah Jakes Roberts have worn and be like, "Ooh, I could rock that. I could pair this with that," because she has found a way, a happy medium, to be conservative, very godly, but still there's like an air of sexy. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to have all those adjectives in the same sentence: sexy, conservative, and still very modest when speaking of a pastor, but I think she does it really well. And I think it's because she was trained up in that lifestyle, even though she had her prodigal daughter moment where she kind of did something that was taboo in the church, being a preacher's kid, being pregnant out of wedlock so early on in life. But I think the way the response was carried out with regards to Dr. Karri Bryant was just very much ruthless and reckless, and pretty much kind of like on the same level, if not worse, than with Devon Franklin and Megan Good. I think because the PR of Devon Franklin was much better than that of Jamal Bryant, we didn't see Megan get as slammed the way that Dr. Karri Bryant is being. Maybe I might be wrong. I might be wrong. Y'all, almost forgot that I was supposed to be doing my makeup while I'm talking to you guys. You see, this is why these get ready with me's take forever, because I'm trying to talk to y'all at the same time, get my makeup done. Another thing that I wanted to touch up on as far as the response, this other pastor, I'm not even going to mention his name because I'm not going to give him the press. Okay, not that I think Pastor Jamal Bryant is this upstanding guy. From his podcast, I really don't think so, but you know, that's not my husband. Let me say that's not my uncle, because like he's at least twice my age and I wouldn't go for him, but that's besides the point. But the response from other pastors, in particular the one that called Dr. Karri Bryant out of her name, he tried to like catch himself because he knew he was going to get backlash for saying it, by saying, I'm not talking about her, I'm saying that the way he presented his wife to us, considering he bought the dress. I watched the clip over and over, and he did call that lady a $2 HOE. He said it. He did. And honestly, like, if I were Pastor Jamal Bryant and I hadn't already responded to the congregation, and my colleague decided to come out his face and say such words about my wife, oh, we would have been fighting. At that point, the Lord would have had to have had a conversation with both of us. I would have had to confess my sins, because there's no amount of sin that can make a person unworthy of God's grace. Because I'm no Bible geek, although I should be. I'm trying. Because even the woman that was an adulterer in the Bible had the grace of the Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, and was spared from stoning because Jesus raised the question of who lived without sin should be the one to cast the first stone. And I know it's so cliche, and that's the first thing we run to when we have these conversations about judgment and condemnation in the church. But you're going to argue with God? So when you start like really throwing rocks and trying to hide your hands on the pulpit at the same time, trust and believe me, you just lost 100,000 members that you could have had your messaging not been one of condemnation. And I think that's the thing with the majority of the church, is the condemnation is oftentimes covered as correction. And correction with the absence of love is not correction. You're condemning them, and only God can condemn. Yep. But yeah, that's how hard these folks were going, trying to quote unquote correct Dr. Bryant. And what is so sad about some of these churches is they would have all this energy for a woman dressed as what they would consider inappropriately, whether that's in the church or outside of the church. But they will silence the little girl, the little boy who's been abused by a leader in faith in that church. Y'all remember that girl that was called to the pulpit, I think a year ago. Was it last year? I think it was in that same year, because she had gotten pregnant out of wedlock and was told to apologize to the church. Meanwhile, her abuser was standing right on the pulpit. Or do you guys remember last year when the little girl was asked what she's thankful for Thanksgiving? And she said she was thankful for her stepmother because her stepmother listens, and how all the women of the church try to gaslight the little baby and tell her that she was a demon for not saying that her mom was her hero and who she was thankful for, and you know, like basically being chastised for not behaving the way other people in the church wanted them to behave. But they will hush hush. If there's an abuser and he just happens to be on the pulpit. And that's with all denominations, to be honest. And even I have my own story of church hurt as a child. Not with the churches that I was raised in New York, but a very interesting church when I was a child, living elsewhere. And I still somehow found my way to the house of the Lord. But I think the reason why some of these churches deter people who genuinely want to have a relationship with God and who genuinely want to change, but you know, the path of being straight and narrow is so hard that they need more than just correction. They need constant guidance. And some may argue that that may not be the case for Dr. Karri Bryant. Maybe she was just a woman that said, hey, he's a pastor, he has a good title, I'm a well accomplished woman, I'm a professor, I've accomplished a lot, we go together real bad and we look good together, we look good on paper, but I'm not about to be walking around with these church hats. I'm not about to be in the First Lady Air Force One fit for the pulpit for the Lord. Like, I'm coming as I am and as I was, and y'all just gonna have to deal with it. And apparently that's what her husband said. Honestly speaking, this has been given way too much attention, not because Dr. Karri Bryant is a bad woman or because standards in a church shouldn't be upheld, but because at the state of the world right now, where people who have no good intention for others having the basic human rights are walking around terrorizing folks, this should be the last of our worries. We should be trying to get people to come closer to God. Come as they are. Correct them and guide them along the way. And here we are. Think pieces about a dress. Come on, y'all. I thought we were better than that. But anyhow, that's my 2 cents. Because if you don't have a strong relationship, if you don't have a strong thirst and hunger to be with the Lord in all areas of your life, in all seasons of your life, then some church folks will really be the ones to say that they successfully kicked you out of the house of the Lord. Because I thought the whole purpose of the church was to be family. And family supposed to correct from a place of love. Not from a place of condemnation. Because we still want that person in the family. We still want that person to call us family. But no, this is how we treat each other. And honestly speaking, with the way that I was treated as a child by a so-called church, I had to have been paid off, by the way. Paid off by my then guardians at the time. There was a time where I wasn't living in New York. I was living in Maryland. And my guardians at the time, they had switched up on me. They started to treat me different, like I wasn't family. And I was violated by someone that was entrusted to take care of me and protect me. And guess what? Before I could even garner up the strength to say what was done to me, that person ran an entire smear campaign against my name as a 10-year-old. And I write about this more in depth in my book. And they basically outcasted me, first from the family. Then they, I guess, paid off some church to pretend like it was this mystical church that could see, where the bishop could see, and you know, he had these powers, and basically coerced everybody to agree on the consensus that I was a witch. Like, that was that person's escape plan, was to silence me, get me out of here, make it so that nobody would want to associate with me. And I was only 10 years old. And the level of isolation, I'm speaking very calmly now because I've had years of therapy and I've been able to come to terms with what happened, what was happening. Not that it doesn't hurt, not that I'm not still like leery of certain things when I am, you know, joining a new congregation or, you know, getting involved with a new church family. Granted, this church wasn't even my church family, but just the level of isolation and outcastedness I felt that day as a child, it's just like almost, it's etched in the back of my brain. I can't unsee it. I can't unexperience it. You know? And it's scary to think that people use the house of the Lord as a place to bully and isolate and tell you that you're not worthy. Who are you to tell the next person they are not worthy? Because we have all fallen short of the grace of God. I just want to make myself clear. I won't be doing any religious or faith-based content. This all worked out because I at some point experienced church hurt and I could relate. So don't expect this type of content from me. But I just wanted to share with you like how crazy this discourse is making the church sound. Because not too long ago, again, last year, when that lady called all these churches pretending to be in need of formula milk, how many of those churches actually helped her? You could count. You could count on your finger how many of the churches she called that a mosque was quicker to help than a lot of these so-called places of worship. So I'm just gonna end on that. Like, we have bigger fish to fry than a dress. And I'm sure, you know, Dr. Karri, whatever limits she was trying to test or whatever she was trying to prove, I'm sure she's going to eventually make the decisions that she thinks is most suitable for her as the first lady of a church. And at the end of the day, it's between her and God. And if you don't like that she presents herself in the way that she does, then just don't go to the church. That's simple. You don't have to go to that church. You don't have to listen to their sermons. You don't have to tithe that church. You know, but we should be taking this opportunity as one to showcase how we can actually help progress as people and believers. And, you know, we should be worried about that. Not the coat of many colors that a first lady is wearing. You know, and I think eventually Dr. Karri will have to conform. She is going to conform in some way. And even when she does, I'm sure it's not going to be enough for some folks. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, God sees her heart in the same way that he sees our heart, and the same way he sees those who condemn her heart. So with that being said, thank you guys so much for coming to my TED Talk. This was extremely long today, but I got a lot done, okay? I'm gonna hurry up and finish my makeup off camera because I do have to get going, and I will come back just to show you guys how it came all together. All right? Thank you so much for stopping by, and this was the Glam Thread Opinions. Bye!